Good evening, everyone, and happy Sussex Day. My name is Wendy Walker. I'm the County Archivist at West Sussex, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to another edition of West Sussex Unwrapped, the series in which we explore different aspects of the history of the county through the archives of West Sussex Record Office and Screen Archive South East. Just a few words of housekeeping before we begin. We will be recording this in order to put it up on our YouTube channel later. And if you have any questions as we go through, if I could ask you to put them in the chat box, and we'll come to those at the end for a question and answer session. This evening, we're marking the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, and VE Day and VJ Day. And we'll be looking through the archives to find out about the lives of people on the home front during the Second World War. And we'll be looking at rationing, evacuees, air raids, the Home Guard, and the threat of invasion. Films from Screen Archive South East will show the Home Guard activities and training. And we will end the event with a compilation of films across the whole of the South East, depicting wartime experience and the end of war celebrations. To explore this further with us tonight, we have Nicola Court, an archivist from West Sussex Record Office. Hello, Nicola. And we have Dr. Frank Gray, former director of Screen Archive South East, and back by popular demand. And I'll now pass over to Nicola to begin our evening.
Okay, good evening. Thanks very much for that, Wendy. And thank you all for joining us on this Sussex Day. As Wendy said, my name's Nicola, and I'm one of the archivists at West Sussex Record Office. This evening, I'm going to give you an overview of some of the items in our collection that relate to the home front, based around the themes which Wendy's already mentioned. It's not a deep dive into the collections because there simply isn't time to go into each theme in depth. We could easily do a presentation just on each theme. But what I want to do is to try and show a different side to some of these themes by thinking a bit more about how the home front was managed and recorded at a local level. The picture that you can see on your screen now shows Bren gun carriers parading past the arcade on the High Street in Bognor Regis during Weapons Week in March 1941, and it's from our Frank Lalouette collection. Just before I get started properly, I wanted to say just a few words about the Record Office. We were established in 1946, and we are one of the oldest county record offices in the country. We're based in Chichester, but our collections most definitely cover the whole county, and we also have collections that are international in content as well. And our collections span more than 1,200 years of history, with our oldest document dating all the way back to the year 780, and our youngest document dates just from this year, and they cover more than 8 miles of shelving. You can find out much more about us via our website, and you can also explore our collections a bit more via our blog. And as Wendy mentioned, a recording of this will later be uploaded to our YouTube channel, where you can access other recorded content, including previous editions of West Sussex Unwrapped. So we're going to start with evacuation. I should imagine that most of you are familiar with the idea of West Sussex receiving evacuees due to the rural nature of our county. And we received evacuees from the very earliest days of the process, right at the beginning of September 1939. And on the screen here, you can see photographs from the George Garland collection of evacuees arriving into Billingshurst Station in September 1939 and later being processed, as it were. So the girls you can see in the top left there with the sign, they're arriving from the Oliver Goldsmith School in Peckham in London. And the women you can see with armbands on are from the local Women's Voluntary Service. There's an awful lot of bustle and movement in these images, and although there's a lot going on and they're very busy, I do think they show a real sense of purpose and organisation going on as well. Prior to evacuation, all the district councils surveyed their householders in order to identify what accommodation they had, if they had any spare accommodation, any spare rooms, if they could take evacuees. And if so, they tried to find out how many they would be prepared to take and what type, so to speak, so older or younger children, girls, boys, or a mixture, and any additional resources they might need to accommodate them, so, for example, mattresses or blankets. On the screen here, you can see the final sheet of a survey for Shipley, where typically the school, as you can see in the top corner, is going to be the billeting centre for the area. The properties have been provisionally allocated evacuees, and the interviewer has noted the householders' preferences as well. And in some instances, you can see some notes about the houses available as well. For example, you can see one says empty, and from another page, you can see one saying that the house is actually closed during the winter. And here you can see the arrangements made for the receipt of evacuees at one of the Lancing schools. All three of the schools in Lancing acted as billeting centres, and one plan notes how important the 2 messenger boys and bicycles will be, as the schools have no telephone, and I'll be returning to the topic of no telephones shortly. And records from the County Council's Education Department really capture the organisation and logistics required to provide both classroom space and accommodation for the children who arrived in the county, with selected head teachers appointed as area liaison officers in order to facilitate the process. On the screen now is a page from a schedule of arrangements to accommodate evacuated children, showing where they will arrive and which village or town will be taking them and how they're going to be processed when they arrive. And as you can see now, the first wave of evacuation saw 27,960 children sent to West Sussex, alongside 2,790 teachers and helpers, all of whom had to be accommodated, and of course the children educated as well. I think this really shows just how incredible it was this mass movement of people was organised in such a short space of time, especially when you consider that communication at that time was mostly conducted by telegram or letter or in person, barely any telephones, certainly no internet, and these liaison officers were going around the county by car. They would get a county car to go round. It took an awful lot of organisation in a real short space of time. So this initial tranche of 27,000 children and over 2,000 adults were followed by thousands more children and adults in subsequent waves. You can see here a rudimentary timetable for the arrival of a subsequent tranche of evacuees to West Sussex, only 6,233 this time, so a significantly smaller number, but still a lot to accommodate. Well, whole schools could be evacuated in some instances along with their teachers, and schools, the receiving schools would often have to run a split timetable in order to accommodate everyone. On the left here, we can see some evacuees in a makeshift classroom. You can see their slates and chalks on the table there. This was taken in September 1939, possibly in Petworth or maybe Pulborough. And you can also see a page from the Slimfold School logbook, which shows the logistics required to essentially split a school in half and educate half as many children again. And twice as many children again, rather. So, of course, it wasn't all plain sailing. It couldn't possibly all be plain sailing. Of course, we know that not all evacuees enjoyed their experiences, but administratively, there were a number of problems as well. The liaison officers noted a number of issues, including excess staff, unsupervised evacuees misbehaving in schools. The example in here is of children scooting up and down the classrooms on their bottoms. There were rogue schools being set up in unsatisfactory conditions, and teachers, it is noted especially women, refusing to follow orders from their new head teachers. And of course, there was a rather thorny issue about what to do if a school was evacuated with its head teacher, and who would be the head teacher at the receiving school if you've got 2 heads. And there's one aspect of evacuation that's perhaps not so widely known about, which is the later evacuation of children and schools from West Sussex outside of the county due to the increased threat of invasion by sea from 1941 onwards. So, for example, children from East Grinstead National School were sent to Tregorin in Wales in 1944, and pupils from Worthing High School for Girls were evacuated to New Ollerton, a mining village in Nottinghamshire. And the Worthing girls' experience is captured in a really beautiful logbook that we have in the school, which records their journey by train, their arrival in New Ollerton and their impressions of Newark, as well as various poems, reflections and drawings. And you can see a page from it there describing the journey and a night in the shelter. This logbook provides both an official but also a personal account of the experience, and it is largely positive. But there are further records in the school collection about the evacuation, such as the headmistress's later report, and you can see a page from that on the screen as well. And these show different sides to the story and a different assessment of the experience. And according to Constant Reed, the headmistress at the time, it was always doomed to failure. As well as this later threat of invasion by sea, West Sussex was under a near constant threat of air raids throughout the war. A survey by Sussex Police provides a really useful summary of the air raids recorded across both East and West Sussex. And you can see the summary page here for Salisbury. which experienced a total of 31 raids of varying types, and they're categorised according to what was dropped on the area. So, of course, to try to mitigate the threat, towns and villages had their own air raid precaution, or later civil defence wardens, the majority of whom were volunteers, and they played a really important role in keeping their communities safe and informed and arranging all the clearing up after raids have gone through. And you can see here the air raid wardens from Chichester all gathered together for this photograph. Many of the air raid precaution wardens kept official diaries and logbooks, and individuals might also keep their own diaries which recorded the regular warnings as well as raids. And occasionally there might be notes on any gunfire that was heard or incendiaries or bombs which were dropped. We've got on the screen here some beautifully written pages from the Warden's book for Falpham near Bognor, covering the period September to December 1940. And going back to school logbooks, they provide a really valuable record of warnings and hits, not just those which fell on the school or during the school day, but also providing information about the impact of local raids on attendance or even losses to the school community. The entries you can see here show the timings of air raids and time spent in shelters during the school day in 1941. That's for Downsbrook School in Worthing. And also there's a page for 1944 from East Grinstead National School. I've just highlighted in red the number of air raid alarms or sirens that are heard. And also in blue, you can see where the raiders have passed. And I think that just gives a very immediate view of how often the children are being sent down into the shelters and how interrupted the school day was. The one that's circled in red there, you can see they're in and out of the shelters pretty much the entire day. In August 1941, the head of Rudgwick Council School declared the term to have been the most worrying of their 45-year career due to the flying bombs of whose near presence there is no safe warning. Of course, air raid shelters became a feature in gardens across the county, as well as in school grounds and other public spaces, such as churchyards, for example. This photograph shows the air raid shelter over at Hayshot, which is now circled in white there, just to show you where it is. It's a bit in the distance in this photo, but it does give a nice idea of how it fitted into the landscape. And here you can see inside the shelter, which, as you can see, must have been a very snug fit. And I think, I don't know, the idea of sitting in there, you know, if you've got 20, 30 people all squashed in there with planes buzzing overhead and sirens sounding and, you know, no idea if something's going to drop out of the sky and bury your air raid shelter in this incredibly enclosed space must have been really quite frightening. Local authorities were also heavily involved with air raid precautions. Most of the local councils had emergency committees, which would ensure that air raid precautions were in place and effective, and they also recorded enemy action. Distress funds were operated for those found to be in need after air raids. Local council records can therefore be really, really helpful in terms of quantifying the material impact of raids. On the screen, you can see a file on the air raid distress fund administered by Littlehampton Urban District Council. And you can catch a bit more of the detail here about the grants that were awarded and why. For example, clothing grants for people to enable people to work, or for children, things such as floor coverings or even funeral expenses. And of course, warnings were not always given or received. The children and staff at Slimfold Primary School had a very lucky escape in December 1942 when the plane dived out of low cloud and fired on the school itself. Luckily, there was no damage or casualties. So although a warning was given, the rather breathless account in the school logbook reports that no warning was heard at the school, and it really was a near miss. So you can get a sense of the slight panic in the head teacher's voice as they write the notes up in the logbook. Following the raid, the chief warden suggested that the school should request a telephone in case of future alerts. In the meantime, they say a local farmer will endeavour to get word to the school if another alert is sounded. So not exactly speedy when time is of the essence. So I think this gives a real sense of the rather perilous state that some of these schools were in, thanks to their fairly isolated rural locations and lack of immediate communication systems such as a telephone. And no doubt fresh in that head teacher's mind would have been the surprise attack on Petworth on the 29th of September 1942, when 3 bombs were dropped with no warning during the middle of the morning by a stray German aircraft, and they landed on the boys' school and laundry. And very sadly, 28 pupils, the headmaster, another teacher and a staff member at the laundry were killed that day. A very heavy death toll, which had a very deep and long-lasting impact on this small market town. Newspapers were not always able to report fully on the raids that took place. Here you can see a headline in the Chichester Observer referring to a raid on a well-known ancient town in the southeast region, which of course was Chichester, although they do then go on to name the 4 streets which were damaged when 4 high explosive devices were dropped on the city on the 10th of February 1943. The City Council minutes for the period note that 8 houses and 3 business premises were totally demolished, and sadly 18 people died and 15 were hospitalised with serious injuries. As you can see on the top of the screen there, the St Martin's area was one of the worst affected by the bomb, with West Street and North Street also being impacted as well, and Chapel Street. As I said, much of the damage and most of the deaths occurred in St Martin's Lane. You can see the devastation caused in these photographs. And down at the bottom of the screen, we have boys from the Oliver Whitby School on West Street clearing debris from their gymnasium after this attack. And here we have a page from a schedule of bomb damage collated by Midhurst Rural District Council, recording the damage done to some of the properties on Bepton Road. This is just those which were demolished or seriously damaged by raids. And this photograph here shows you exactly what that sort of damage looked like. This is bomb damage to Bepton Road in May 1943. So alongside the air raid wardens and associated volunteers, the various battalions of the Home Guard, our so-called last line of defence, helped to safeguard our county and its residents, primarily by providing a fighting force should the German army succeed in invading Britain. And as the war progressed, the Home Guard assumed other duties such as bomb disposal or manning anti-aircraft guns. This photograph shows the Petworth Battalion, and it was taken in May 1943. And although the Home Guard came to be nicknamed Dad's Army because of the age of many of the men who joined, it was in fact open to all men aged between 17 to 65 years. And similarly, although many of its members were men who were not eligible to serve due to their health and age, it also included men who worked in reserved occupations, many of whom worked long hours in physically demanding and increasingly dangerous jobs. On the screen here are the papers of Dr. Carruthers Caulfield of Rustington, his Home Guard papers. And I've just included down the side some bits from the Home Guard inspection and assault at arms programme you can see in the corner there. This was held on the 2nd of August 1941 and shows some of the skills and attributes considered necessary to be for the Home Guard, and shows how seriously it was taken as well. I really like the bit right at the bottom about attack being the best means of defence. Attack, attack, and then attack again. You'll be seeing footage of the Home Guard, film footage of the Home Guard in action later on this evening. But at the Record Office, we have a number of records relating to some of these battalions, including training books, patrol books, and other notebooks, instructions, and photographs. And here you can see the personal wallpapers of F.B. Hollis of Chichester, who was in the city's Home Guard, including a copy of the Home Guard pocketbook written by Brigadier General A.G.U. Green of Storrington. And on the left, we can see a photograph of an inspection of the Chichester Home Guard being taken very seriously there again as well. And a nice quote at the top, the motto, "In war, there are 2 kinds of men, the quick and the dead. You be quick." So I mentioned reserved occupations, and of course, many farmers and agricultural workers were not called up to serve. However, as the war progressed and the country required more men to sign up to the forces, women took their place in various occupations and were themselves conscripted from December 1941 to serve in the armed forces or to take on vital war work. As more women were required for war work, councils established nurseries to ensure that their infants and preschool children could be looked after, enabling women to take on previously inaccessible jobs. These 3 women on the screen here are members of the NAFI, that's the Navy, Army and Air Force Industries, which supported the armed forces. This was taken in November 1943. Most famously, of course, the Women's Land Army, which had been established in World War I, was revived as early as June 1939 as the government sought to prepare itself for war. As more women, or land girls as they were popularly known, trained and became available to work on the land, male agricultural labourers were released and able to sign up to the forces. On the left, we have this rather splendid portrait of Janet McDowell in front of her tractor. She worked at Manor Farm in Chidham. And then in 1942, a women's timber corps was founded with workers nicknamed Lumberjills. You can see some in this rather jolly and probably quite unusual picture of forestry work taking place at Lavington in February 1944. Of course, as well as freeing up male workers to serve, the Women's Land Army was essential in ensuring that food production continued. Although women were trained to work in all agricultural occupations, around a quarter worked in dairies. You can see this land girl looking rather alarmed by this quite large cow she's faced with on the cover of the Land Girl magazine from May 1940. The land girls worked very long hours and physically demanding roles. This page from the same edition of the Land Girl lists some suggestive remedies for common ailments such as chilblains, animal bites, a nail in a shoe and cracked hands, illustrating the rough and very physical nature of their work. Lady Gertrude Denman of Balcombe Place is closely associated with the Land Army, having served as its director in both World Wars, and you can see her there in the middle making a speech at a Land Army rally in Arundel in March 1945. The Burrell manuscripts at the Record Office include several files relating to Lady Denman and the administration of the Women's Land Army, including these two pamphlets you can see on the screen here. This one is beautifully illustrated for service in the Women's Land Army, and this very direct appeal on the other one there. One file includes a diagram of how to make a portable food carrier and some suggested menus for some tasty and filling meals, which would fill up a hard-working land girl's stomach for the day. Suggested recipes include curried tripe, macaroni and kidney stew, and fish roly-poly. And all this talk of food leads us nicely into rationing, something which is always closely associated with World War II, despite lingering on for years afterwards. Rationing was introduced in January 1940 to ensure fair shares for everyone at a time of national shortages. Ration books were given to every man, woman and child, and ration goods could be bought with a certain number of coupons. And householders had to register with shops in order to buy food, with shops allocated enough rations to serve registered customers. Not all products were rationed, but they might still be subject to shortages. And householders were encouraged to dig for victory and grow your own food as queues at shops became commonplace. You can see a nice queue here at a fishmonger's in Bognor, alongside this nice little cartoon about queuing for food. Coincidentally, the cartoon also is taking place, shows a scene at a fishmonger's, and the lady that's walking off rather haughtily says, "No, not for me, thanks. A really keen queuer is only interested when shopkeepers play fair and haven't anything." So with foodstuffs in short supply, recipes were adapted or created to make use of commonly available or substitute foodstuffs. You can see a Ministry of Food leaflet here advising readers on how to make the most of the fat ration. And in order to ensure enough for all and a healthy diet, the Ministry of Food also offered advice such as this suggested weekly menu for children, including cheese or cooked beetroot and raw cabbage sandwiches, plenty of cod liver oil, and a smattering of swede or turnip. And I'm sure that was a hit with children everywhere. However, the wartime diet is seen to have been one of the healthiest the nation ever had, with an emphasis on a varied diet and vitamins. And the fair share element meant that previously malnourished people actually had more food to eat. And as a result, infant mortality declined and life expectancy actually rose. But of course, it wasn't just food that was rationed. Petrol was actually the first commodity to be rationed in 1939. And then clothing was also rationed from 1941. And then fuel, including most types of coal and soap, in 1942. And there's another little cartoon there about rationing. This time it's about clothing. You can see the lady's made herself a nice outfit from her carpet and curtains, and she's saying to her shocked husband, "Like it? No coupons." So food rationing continued in some form until July 1954, while coal rationing finally ended in July 1959. And talk of endings brings us to Victory in Europe Day on the 8th of May 1945, being celebrated here in Bognor Regis High Street. And that was followed by Victory in Japan Day on the 15th of August, bringing a final end to the deadliest conflict in human history. Unfortunately, we have very few contemporary records which capture the events which took place around the county on VE Day, and basically nothing for VJ Day apart from this photograph. So I'd like to finish my segment with an appeal. If you have any records, including photographs, which capture VE and VJ days, either or, in West Sussex, please do get in touch with us because we'd be really, really keen to hear from you. So that is it for me. As I said, this is just an overview. There's a lot more to explore in our collection. So if your interest has been piqued, then do please take a look at our blog and our YouTube channel. And you can also follow us on our various social media channels. You are very welcome to contact us if you have any questions about our collections, and you might even want to come in and pay us a visit, which would be great. So I'll now hand over to Dr. Frank Gray, who will be providing us with this evening's film show.
Thank you, Nicola. And good evening, everyone. Yes, I have the special pleasure of introducing you to the Sussex Home Guard training films. To think that these films were found in a house clearance in Lewes about 25 years ago. And we'll never know how the films got to the house in Lewes, but what is special, and of course is emblematic of the work which record offices and film archives do, is we're constantly uncovering the past, and it's a very, very exciting process. Next slide, please. Screen Archive South East is part of the University of Brighton and works in close partnership with the West Sussex Record Office. And its role is to collect, preserve, and promote the screen heritage of the South East. Next slide. And what's very clear when you start looking at the Home Guard training films, and as you've also been, as Nicola has outlined, the Home Guard training films come at a very, very special time in the war, when it looks like the Germans are about to invade. After the German invasions of Poland, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France, the Home Guard was established on the 14th of May, 1940. And the Home Guard was to be Britain's last line of defense against a German invasion. And of course, to think that within weeks of the establishment of the Home Guard, 1.5 million men had signed up. Next slide, please. And to think that in 18th of June, 1940, every home in the country received a 4-page leaflet entitled "If the Invader Comes." It laid out how Britons would deal with the imminent invasion. Next slide. What was so important for the establishment of the Home Guard across the country was first to set out its duties. Its key duties were observation and reporting of enemy attack, delaying and obstructing the enemy, protection of roads, railways, bridges, and factories. That were the duties, but the first thing, of course, was that all the men who signed up had to be trained to defend the towns and coastlines. In Sussex, training schools were established in Amberley and Burwash, and training films began to be made and screened in local cinemas. Next slide, please. And a fascinating man who became a figurehead of the Sussex Home Guard was Colonel Ebenezer Pike. He'd been educated at Harrow and Sandhurst, served in the Grenadier Guards, and his home was at Dale Park near Arundel. Our film compilation is about to begin, and what's very interesting about it is that we were able to find a rare recording of Colonel Pike speaking from 1942. In it, he speaks of the spirit of the Home Guard, which for him was epitomized by unselfish service. Now, just before I ask my colleague Jane to start the film, I just want to alert you to the fact that when you show films in a webinar, as you're experiencing tonight, there are always network issues. So I'm afraid there might be some stuttering. So, Jane, if you could please start the film, thank you.
I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes about the Home Guard, and in particular about the spirit of the Home Guard. What is the Home Guard and what does it stand for? It is a force of over 1.5 million men of Britain who have come forward, most of them voluntarily and without any previous military training, to fight for their country in its hour of peril. The large majority of the Home Guard are already fully employed in civil trades and occupations, most of which are now of national importance. Enrolment in the Home Guard means, before all else, unselfish service. It means for every one of us doing that a bit extra, a bit more than we feel inclined to do. It means when we return home already tired after a full day's work on the farm, in the office, in the factory, turning out again, often in the dark, in the cold, in the wet, in order to attend training, drills and exercises essential for our efficiency. It means giving up at least part of our one day of rest, our Sunday, for the same purpose.
So now we begin to look at some of the West Sussex Home Guard films. And we know that either 19 or more Home Guard training firm films were made. This particular episode is entitled What to Do If You're Approached by a Fifth Columnist, i.e. an enemy spy. It was filmed early summer 1940 in colour. First, the wrong way. Two members of the platoon stand casually at their post. And a man in a trench coat, here he is, approaches them. Is he just a friendly neighbour? He offers them cigarettes. And before they know it, he's pulled out a revolver. Now, that was the wrong way. Let's look at the right way. How to do it properly. The Home Guard soldiers are now alert and ready at their post. The fifth columnist approaches. One soldier moves to the side, the other in front, bayonets mounted, and rifles ready to be fired. His pockets are checked, and a gun is found. Three other soldiers rush in, and the spy is led away. What's been demonstrated to us is the importance of organization and well-coordinated action. The next episode answers the question, can a passing car be dangerous? It begins with the wrong way. 7 soldiers all crowd around a car. The decision is taken that there is no threat. It begins to drive off, but there's a hidden passenger, and he shoots at all of the men. He also throws a small bomb. It's a disaster. So what is the right way to inspect a car? First of all, the flank is covered, and the car is stopped in advance of the post. The driver advances. And now to inspect the car. This the sergeant does, as he is well protected. But now he discovers that there's a hidden passenger. So by doing it the right way, both the driver and the passenger have been apprehended. And of course, the lesson learned is that to do it the right way is to be alert, inquisitive, and observant. And like all the Home Guard films, it's a demonstration of good training and good organization. The next film is devoted to roadblocks, the right way and the wrong way of building roadblocks. An interesting question which we have not been able to answer is, where were these films made? This one begins with action stations. The arrival of men on bicycle to the designated place. Home Guard training had taught that every village and community had to agree its principles of defense and put them into action. And now to the rendezvous, where the men assemble, and each one carries his gas mask. Battle stations. And each man has his own task, which is so important. It's how the platoon works together to install a roadblock. Here they come, and to the left by the wall are the two key parts of a roadblock, the rails and the concrete bollards. With the roadblock completed, it was known that it would stop all vehicles, including tanks. The training manuals emphasized the need for the Home Guard to have courage, knowledge, hard work, self-sacrifice, and goodwill. So that's the right way. What is the wrong way to erect a roadblock? Well, it's pretty obvious. The wrong way is demonstrated because there is no coordination. There has been no training. No one is following the drill. The men are not working together. Within the Sussex Home Guard training manual, there's detailed descriptions about how to protect a village. And a key aspect of that is the erection of roadblocks all around it. You have to imagine watching this in a cinema in 1940, 1941. And of course, there would have been a live commentary. And in the audience are the new recruits. Episode 19 is the one which explicitly engages with the aerial invasion, which could take place at any time. The belief was a large army of airborne troops would land and destroy vital communications. And then they would prepare the way for coastal landings across Sussex, Kent, and East Anglia. So it was so important that the Home Guard were taught about how to defend the country against the landing of German paratroops. So in this part of the film, The Right Way, here is a German paratroop. He takes off his parachute, takes off his overall. But what he doesn't know is that members of the platoon are waiting for him. And they have been trained that the paratrooper could be carrying egg bombs, special weapons. And how do you prevent the prisoner from running away? By pulling down his coat and pants. The lesson is that you must attack from flank and rear, never from the front. Now, what is the wrong way? The wrong way is to confront the parachutist from the front. And of course, the wrong way is to remind the trainee member of the Home Guard that a parachutist can be very dangerous. As ever, the lesson is follow the rules. The next episode, number 16, is entitled Arthur, and it is about camouflage and a demonstration of successful camouflage. A member of the Home Guard, you can just see him moving his arm, but there he is by the trunk of that tree. The Home Guard were taught that the best protection is to be invisible. And finally, to the last episode. It addresses the question, how to take cover when under air attack. First, the wrong way. The siren is sounded, and you do whatever you want to. That's not right. Here is the best way. After the siren is sounded, throw yourself face down, with your elbows on the ground, placing your hands behind your neck and over your ears. This will protect your eardrums and your spine. We conclude with an advertisement for the Home Guard pocketbook, written by a Major General from Storrington. To think that more than 70,000 men and women served in the Sussex Home Guard from 1940 to 1944. Thank you, Jane. And now I'm going to introduce our concluding film, which has sound. It's entitled War and Peace, and it was made by Screen Archive Southeast in 2020 to mark the 75th anniversary of Victory in Europe. It's a compilation film which draws on films made across the Southeast, and it was a special production for the archive because it provided an opportunity to look across the collection and just become aware of how well it illustrated the war years. This film was directed and edited by Nicholas Clark of Screen Archive Southeast, and the music is by Nina Humphreys. We're going to show it this evening in two parts. The first part deals with the war years, and then the second part looks at the end of the war in May of 1945. So thank you, Jane. Please start War and Peace. And now to the next part, which addresses the celebrations of May 1945.
Thank you very much to both Frank and Nicola for such a fascinating tour through the archives tonight. I do think some really interesting and exciting things happen when you bring together written archives, diaries, photographs with the films. And I think it's certainly demonstrated that tonight. We don't, as far as I can see, have any questions in. Oh, yes, we have one. Do you have any footage or photos of boats, etc., at the harbour at Shoreham leading up to or around D-Day? Frank, I think that's one for you.
I'm sad to say I don't think we do. You know, one of the big challenges for looking at films made during the war years is that there was rationing of film, and so we end up films which have been saved, have been rescued, are those which were made for official purposes. So the Sussex Home Guard acquired film stock. We also know that there was an official war cinematographer in Brighton by the name of Winston Robinson. He also had film. But when you look across both Sussex and the region, it's frightening just how little film has survived. But you always have hope. You have hope that maybe one day, such as the Home Guard films being found in a house clearance in Lewes 25 years ago, there may be other suitcases still to be found. And if we were lucky, it may indeed, such a suitcase may indeed have some material from Shoreham. So we live in hope.
Thank you, Frank. The next question is, I recently came across a photo of the Worthing Home Guard street fighting unit. Is much known about this unit? Nicola, is that one for you?
I don't know anything about it personally. I don't know. I guess Worthing Library might be a good place to start. And Chris Hare, of course, has written quite a few books about Worthing. There's a very good one about Worthing. It's a compilation of oral histories. Whether he might be the best person to ask if he might know anything about it. I mean, short of searching on our catalogue and looking in the Worthing books, you know, there's lots of Worthing history books. I don't know. I mean, I think, Keith, you're probably more of an expert on Worthing than I am, knowing that you're a regular correspondent of ours. So what's Frank looking in there?
Frank's holding up a book.
Yes, that's Paul Crook's book.
Oh, right.
Which is very valuable. A lot of course, the material came from the West Sussex Record Office. And there are references to Worthing throughout it. And Screen Archive South East, only a few years ago, came across a short film of the Worthing Home Guard. It's largely to do with lining up. So you can imagine it's evening exercises. but it'd be fascinating to hear from someone who has knowledge of the Sussex Home Guard, because they may be able to identify the activities and indeed identify some of the men in the film.
Thank you, Frank. Someone is asking how much of this excellent material is available to view at record offices. I think everything we've seen tonight is.
Everything we've seen tonight is, yes. I think, Frank, a lot of the footage you've shown, is that available via your website?
Oh, yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Screen Archive Southeast, its website has hundreds of films to do with Sussex in the 20th century, and within that, but using the search engine, you can very easily find the Home Guard films.
Mm. And the Land Army films, which I used for another event, which a resource pack, which are really good. But yes, certainly everything that I showed is available to view in the search room at the Record Office if you need to get a reader's ticket. But yes, it is available. And more besides.
I was going to say, I hope
much more besides.
This evening has whetted your appetite to come and find out more. And we have someone saying that they have a Facebook page for the 5th Sussex Worthing Home Guard, and also a page for the 4th and 9th Sussex Shoreham, as they've been researching both units for Shoreham Fort. So that's really interesting. Mm. And do we have any footage of the bombing of East Grinstead in 1943?
I don't think we do, I'm afraid. There's some material from the 20s and 30s, but not during the war. And I suspect, too, that's to do with the rationing of film. However, there were some events in Sussex which were filmed by the national newsreel companies, such as Pathé. And so sometimes if we can't find local regional film of a particular, especially a big event, they can be found in national newsreel. The Pathé website is very good. So there's a little chance if you wrote, if you typed in East Grinstead, you might just get something.
Thank you, Frank. And as Frank said, and Nicola, we're always looking for more material. So if you're eyes on the ground, please let us know. And we'd be really interested to know if you recognised any of the locations from that, particularly from the Home Guard films.
Yes.
To be able to know more about that. And I know that at least one of our participants this evening, recognised his grandfather in one of the films, which is fantastic.
Amazing.
So thank you for that. We have a short feedback questionnaire. If I could ask you to fill that in, we'd be really grateful for your help with that. You can catch up on this and all of our previous episodes on our YouTube channel, and this one will be going up shortly. But I think it just remains for me to say thank you once again to all of our speakers tonight, and to thank you as well for joining us. We were very glad to have you with us, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of West Sussex Unwrapped. Thank you.